This isn't something that's really talked about. What goes on behind the scenes, brand deals and sponsorships, ad revenue and platforms, affiliate marketing, creating merch. What does that look like from a monetary perspective? Let's talk more about how these deals get done.
Welcome to the first episode of the Creators Agency podcast. I am one of the co-founders of Creators Agency, Apple, here with my co-founder, Eric.
We're super excited to be starting this podcast with you. You know, we founded Creators Agency because of the many problems that we saw within that space, experiencing firsthand issues with creators as it relates to contract negotiations, working with brands.
I mean, between the two of us, we've been in the industry for now close to a decade, if not more, through Creators Agency and other kind of ventures in the space. So let's kick it off with brand deals and sponsorships. This is really our bread and butter at Creators Agency. We've facilitated thousands of brand deals over the past couple of years. For a lot of creators, this is one of the key ways that they are creating an income online and an income based on what they're doing in a very sustainable way too. Compared to some of these other revenue streams, some are going to be more consistent, some are going to be less consistent, but brand deals can definitely be one that helps creators to build that scale, build that sustainability with their business online. So I really do think that anyone can start working with brands as soon as they are creating content. And the reason for that is because there are so many ways that a creator can provide value to a brand. One of which, and a very obvious way of which, is if that creator has a massive audience, there are going to be brands that want to get in front of that audience. And that's a way that a brand partnership could provide value. But there are also so many other ways that creators can provide value to brands. For example, say you're a small creator and you're like, I don't have a big audience. I don't think I could really work with a brand yet. If you have the ability to script, film, edit, produce content, that's something that a company normally has to hire an entire external team to come in and do. That is very expensive, right? If a company wants to go out there and shoot an ad for their company that they go and then they run on, Instagram or Meta or wherever, that's a pretty expensive endeavor for them to hire a copywriter to script it, to hire, videographers to come and shoot it, maybe actors even to be in the video. There's so many moving pieces there and so many costs where if you as a single person can come in and offer to do that at a price that is, going to be far more reasonable to a company than maybe what it would cost them to go out there and do that on their own. That's another way, a completely separate way that you could provide value to that brand. And, maybe that video doesn't even get posted on your socials. They're just using that purely as an ad. That's a way that you could start working with a brand, even if you have no audience to speak of, right? And so if you're small, it just means you have to get a little bit more creative.
It's all about how do I add as much value to this partnership, which is a two-way partnership, one with your brand, with the brand that you're partnering, but the other with the audience that you're ultimately serving from that side. And how do you add as much value to both sides?
That's kind of how we at Creators Agency approach, negotiating brand partnerships, because where is that value creation? Put yourself in the shoes of the company that you're speaking with or the company you want to work with and try to understand, where do they see value and what are they looking for to help them achieve their objectives, right? And a lot of that just comes down to asking a lot of questions and getting curious, because the more you understand the person or the company that you're trying to work with, the better able you're going to be able to serve them and to show them something that they're going to be interested in, right? If you come into every conversation with the same, cookie cutter, here's what I do for everybody. Do you want this or do you not want this? It's not necessarily going to take you very far. Whereas if you are able to get a little bit more creative, ask a few more questions to really understand, what is going to be interesting to the person that you're talking with, that's where the most value can be created. And for us, it really just comes down to having really candid and transparent conversations with the brands that we work with, right? Because the deeper you can dig and the more insight you can gain from the people you're talking to, the more productive of a conversation you're going to have, and the more opportunities are going to be created.
That point is probably the most important part here thus far, at least. The proposal stage, how do you figure out what it is the brand is really looking for? How can you do your own diligence yourself? And again, figure out how to have these transparent conversations with brands about what, their main targets are. What can you creatively push forward on your end as a creator to say, hey, like, I really think that you could benefit in this way. Let me just put together a proposal in means that, in ways that perhaps they didn't even think about in the past. And we've seen so many success cases in the past there where, creative solutions to brand partnerships are ultimately, one, going to grab a lot of attention, but two, they're going to be, they're going to foster, the start of very, very lucrative and very long-term relationships because it shows that you care in what brands are ultimately trying to do. So going back to the very first point of what Apple mentioned, it doesn't take a big following or anything like that to strike up a brand deal. It really takes just creativity. And I think just showing that you care and you're working on their team and you're working on their side to figure out solutions that maybe they haven't thought of yet.
And for us, we're always coming from a creator first perspective, right? Like we were founded on the basis of wanting to help and support creators to grow. But when I tell people that I help creators get brand deals, they're like, oh, you're the guys that like take advantage of brands and like get as much money as possible. And I'm like, no, not at all. Like being creator first doesn't mean trying to take advantage of brands. It's quite the opposite, right? Because if we're doing our jobs well, we're helping creators make money for a very long time, right? And so in any proposal that I'm going into, any negotiation that I'm going into, I'm not just thinking about how do we get the most money possible out of this brand for this one deal. We're thinking about, how do we strike something up where everyone's going to be winning for 12 months, 24 months, even further into the future? Because that's really what it means to be creator first, right? Like it's not in a creator's best interest for us to try to squeeze an extra 20% out of a brand if it means that brand's never going to want to work with that creator again, right? If that burns the bridge, if the brand doesn't feel like we're working with them, but instead it's kind of an adversarial relationship, that's really not in the creator's best interest at the end of the day. So being able to take that long-term outlook, which in our perspective is kind of like the cream of the crop, like that's what we're trying to optimize for. Because in the world of being a creator, like it can be really, kind of spiky in terms of generating revenue, right? Some months are great. Some months are scary, right? Because, if you don't have many deals lined up, or if, the AdSense revenue isn't really there in a month, like from our experience in the industry, there are a lot of people that are operating way more short-sighted than we are.
To be honest, I think it's much simpler than that. It's really just aligning values. If you align values with what you're trying to achieve in the long term with a brand that ultimately aligns with those same values that you have, and you can see a long-term partnership, that's the biggest, that's the biggest win-win that you can possibly have. It makes it very easy to strike up a longer-term partnership and think about the impact, the downstream impact of that as well towards the audience that you have, and how that impacts and how that's going to convert potentially better because you're creating that authenticity as well by saying, hey, look, this is a brand that I'm really fully on board with, because of XYZ reasons that aligns with what I'm trying to achieve and what I'm trying to help achieve for you, the audience, from that perspective as well.
Totally. And so how do we take it to the next level, right? Like once you figure out where those values are aligned and how to create that alignment long term, how do creators get paid? Eric, I'd love for you to dive into kind of some of the payment models that creators can be thinking about once they have that value alignment and they're trying to figure out, how does that translate into dollars in their pocket?
When it comes to negotiating getting paid, ultimately it really comes down to how do you align incentives in the best way possible. Brands aren't going to be willing to pay, astronomical rates for something that doesn't ultimately give them a form of ROI. And creators, as much as they would love to, are not going to be very well suited for if brands require them to do so many deliverables and so many avenues of creatives that ultimately undervalues what they stand for, right? But in terms of like the different payment models and how deals are negotiated, you can really think of them in 4 or 5 different ways, right? The most simple one is a flat fee arrangement. The flat fee arrangement is simply, hey, I want X dollars for providing Y deliverables. And this is going to cost this much. Or brands have, a certain budget that they're willing to spend. In return, they want X deliverables, right? That's a very straightforward approach. What we're seeing more of now, compared to even some of the changes that we've seen over the past 3 years, brands have obviously gotten much, much smarter. There's much more transparency now. There's much more measures of how to think of return on investment from the brand side So we do see a little bit more association as well with thinking of performance-based metrics. Now, what that could be a CPM model, a cost per mil model based off of how many views a particular deliverable receives, or how much engagement a particular deliverable provides towards that brand. Also, performance-based model would be the affiliate model, where you're directly associating the conversion of views into purchases of that brand's product through affiliates, and in return, you receive a percentage of that particular deal. Those are two performance-based models where, the brand gets what they want. They're paying, ultimately for a fixed customer acquisition cost from that perspective, because they know exactly what they're paying. They know what they're paying for their end product, or what they're charging for their end product, and they know what they're ultimately willing to acquire customers for. And if the influencer is able to do that in a much more effective way, both people win in the end, because, performance ultimately means that higher conversions results in higher pay for creators and higher sales for the brand itself.
Some brands are focused on brand awareness, right? And so what they care about is getting their brand in front of as many eyeballs as possible. If that's the case, then I like to look at some kind of CPM-based model or some kind of CPM-based hybrids. And then the other side of the coin is direct response. What that means is that they are, looking for conversions, and that the cost to acquire a customer is a number that's very important to them. And so when we're working with a brand that values that, that's when we're going to be looking at some kind of, deal that includes an affiliate link. And oftentimes, again, these are hybrid deals where there's some kind of flat rate component. And then in addition to that, we've got that performance-based kicker in the form of, okay, for each person that signs up, or for every XYZ conversion, a purchase, whatever it might be, then there's additional payment to the creator there. Again, so that if the video outperforms and it does really well, the creator sees some upside on that. And on the brand side, if the video completely flops, the brand's going to be a little bit more protected than they would if it was just a strict flat fee, regardless of how performance looks. One quick case study here, like we'll do this from time to time where brand is unsure about, hey, we don't really know if a partnership with XYZ creator is going to make sense. And we'll kick off purely affiliate. We're like, hey, no risk to you. Let's just try an affiliate deal. Let's try an affiliate deal and see how it goes. And there have been so many times where brands have just been surprised. They're like, really? Like, you're open to just like giving this a shot? Because so many other creators just won't do that. And other agencies are totally uninterested in pursuing things like that to give the brand that proof of concept and to help them ease in, especially if it's a newer brand that hasn't done, flat fee marketing before. And then there've been so many times where like the ads performed great, and that's been all of the extra fuel that we needed to get the brand on board for something long-term and successful, and for the creators getting paid, on a flat rate.
Often a question that we get asked is, how do you have a conversation, or how do you have a discussion with the brand after a video has completely flopped? How do you have a difficult conversation like that with brands while at the same time ensuring or working towards, saving kind of the longevity of a longer term partnership?
Those are some of the hardest conversations that I'm having on a day-to-day basis, is like, what do you do when something completely flops? And so the first thing that I'll say is, prior to a flop, the more effectively you can set expectations, the easier those conversations are going to be. And like, we are so in the business of expectation setting. Like, that is what I spend so much time doing on a daily basis. It's like, before something happens, how do we make sure that everybody is on the same page about what we're expecting? Because the disappointment or the negative sentiment, where that comes from is a misalignment of expectations. If a brand expects the video to do 1 million views, but you're only expecting the video to do 100,000 views, the video could do 200,000 views. You're stoked, and the brand is pissed. They're like, this video completely flopped. And in your mind, it was a huge win. So it's all about setting those expectations up front, right? So that everybody knows what is the objective that we're shooting for, and what does success look like, right? If everybody has the same definition of success, it's going to be a lot easier to have those conversations, because it's going to be a lot easier to isolate what went wrong. And let's say it's a direct response campaign where they're looking for conversions. So they say, no, they didn't really perform for us. Well, then we can dive in and try to figure out, where did things go wrong? Because if we don't know where things went wrong, it's really hard to come up with, a productive path forward. So we'll go to them and we'll try to figure out, did we not generate enough clicks, right? Were not enough people who saw the ad interested enough to click on it. And so if that's the case, then it's probably something to do with the creative, right? Then it's probably the ad wasn't compelling enough. The call to action wasn't compelling enough to get people to actually click. Maybe they say, no, the clicks were fine. Like relative to how many views the video got, clicks look normal. And then it's like, okay, well then is it something to do with the conversion rate, right? And so maybe they say, yeah, like normally we see a 10% conversion rate, but this video only had a 2% conversion rate. Maybe it's a situation where the ad did not construe the product in the best light possible. Maybe it's a situation in which, the alignment between the product and the audience just wasn't really there. Or, maybe it's just a situation where we need to tweak the messaging and try again. And then once we figure that out, it's like, is it salvageable, right? Like, is there a way that we can redeem this? And so we'll usually get pretty creative with this. Like if it seems like, we got a lot of clicks, but, not enough people converted, we've done creative things like remarketed to the people who didn't quite make it all the way to that conversion by having the creator record a short video and then allowing the brand to use that as remarketing material, or, in a simpler case, it's like maybe we just need to run some additional promotions as like an Instagram story or a YouTube community post or something like that, just to generate a little bit more interest in the product and get that remarketing, right? Or maybe we'll even rerun the ad in a subsequent video if the creator has, extra ad inventory. Maybe sometimes we'll do that just as a make good, to show the brand that we actually care, right? Because so many creators are just quick to say, oh, didn't perform, too bad for you, so sad, let's try again. And that just doesn't really work very well, right? That's not how you build a relationship where everybody feels like they're equal partners and their voices are being heard.
As it comes to working on brand deals with creators and brands is really thinking about, hey, how do we do this together as opposed to thinking about things on a transactional basis. Hey, they're paying me a lot of money this one time. Let's see how it goes. Once it's done, once it's delivered, once the video is live, I'm done and I'm going to move on. That's the worst thing that you could possibly do as a creator, especially as it relates to, forging longer term partnerships and relationships with brands that have the potential for paying a lot more money going forward.
And just, think about it, right? Put yourself in the shoes of the brand. Like if they can tell that you're just there to do a quick transaction, they're not going to want to have transparent conversations with you because they're going to be afraid that you're just going to take any information that they give to you and use it against them, right? But when you can come in and show the brand that like you really care about the longevity here and like their long-term success and you're willing to go above and beyond for them, that's when you can actually have really good conversations. They're actually going to open up a bit because they're not just going to think, oh, this creator is just like all the other ones to where I shared this data with them and now they're trying to leverage that against me for their benefit. Like that's not going to take you very far. So yeah. Eric, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into like, we've been talking about pricing, but like what are we actually delivering, right? Like there's so many different things that creators can do for brands. So would love you to just kind of dive into, some of the deliverables that our creators and creators at large are typically doing when they're working with brands.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the most exciting part because this is where you can really put your creative brain or creative mind to work. We've all seen on YouTube, creators that say, hey, I want to thank the sponsor of this video. And XX, blah, blah, blah. That goes on for about 60 seconds. That's typically what we call, a standard 60-second integration. I think the audiences have mostly gotten used to that by now in a similar kind of way that we'd be seeing TV commercials on TV from that side. But there are really so many other ways that we can think about things. You can also consider a dedicated video, whether it's a finance app or whether it's some kind of technology solution or software integration or something of that nature that is on the side of the brand deals. Like how do we incorporate, a full-on dedicated video so that, they get more exposure, the brand gets more exposure, but also you go really into full detail about, a review, if you will, of what this particular product is, becoming even a little bit more creative about things, as opposed to doing a full dedicated video on just one product. Maybe you do a dedicated video on 3 products, but also highlight the one product that's being, paid for from that perspective. I would say that some creators are a little bit more hesitant than others in doing this. because that often does take away a lot of the ad creative and the creative ability for them to really come up with a piece of content that is more genuine and more authentic to them. So I would say, generally speaking, from what we've seen, dedicated videos are a little bit less common, but it does happen on occasion. I'd say especially with smaller creators. Wouldn't you agree with that, Apple?
You can provide so much more value to a brand by going the extra mile and getting more creative with like, how do I actually make this ad engaging? And so for the creators that we work with, like, it is very much night and day. Like, I've got my creators that I know, like, whenever they're making an ad, it's going to be incredible. It's going to be a banger, and like no one's going to skip the ad. And it's like, it's great because like in the YouTube retention chart, like you can actively see who is making good ads. Like, I can look at all of the videos from all the creators that we work with and see like objectively who's making ads that people actually watch.
Who are some creators that come to mind that do a really good job at doing a creative, have come up with creative ad solutions or ad creatives on that?
Two of my favorites, both based here in Austin, both good friends of mine. Jake Carlini is incredible. Every time we do a brand deal with him, I just know it's going to be 10 out of 10. I mean, he's made entire movie trailers as ad creatives before for brands, like all out. I mean, they're crazy. One really good example is if you watch his secret movie theater video, the ad read that he did for Shopify in that video is one of the best ad reads I have ever seen on YouTube, hands down. And I think that video is almost a year old now, but I still, ever since that video went out, I can't think of a better ad read that I've seen. And then Isaac Carlton, who he's a newer creator, but he's growing extremely quickly. I think he's the fastest growing filmmaking creator right now. His ad reads are absolutely stellar. He goes above and beyond, and brands just totally love him for it. And so like, those are the kinds of creators, and mind you, like, both of those people are making more, entertainment focused videos. So even if you don't find yourself in a niche like that, where you can tap into entertainment, there are plenty of like informational channels that still do go above and beyond in their ad reads and aren't just reciting talking points and getting through the ad read as fast as they can. What works extremely well is tying the ad into the video in a more natural way. And more brands are picking up on this and asking for it, but like, when you can be proactive about it and suggest that ahead of time, works out really well. But thinking about, how can I bring this brand into the video in a way that isn't just stop the video, do the ad read, resume the video.
Even if, for whatever reason, say the performance of one of those ad reads doesn't live up to expectations, given the fact that you really went above and beyond, we'll often compensate as well and want to get the creators, or want to get the brands to want to do more deals with you simply because of that, and simply because you're putting out fantastic product and fantastic ad reads.
We work with a number of creators on doing like organic mentions in their content. So if there's a brand that you're just constantly talking about and always recommending people to, it could totally be worth reaching out to them and striking up a conversation about like, what would it look like to guarantee to the brand, hey, I'll make sure to just weave you guys in super naturally, not a whole ad read or anything like that, but even just as simple as, mentioning their name in a certain number of videos every week, month, quarter, etc. And just kind of having that relationship where they know that they're just going to make a presence or make an appearance in your content on a regular cadence. Those are always super interesting. Above and beyond that, I mean, for the creators that make those really engaging ad reads and make a really good impression on the brands, there could be opportunities for brands to actually, license that content or hire those creators as, paid actors to come in and film ads with the brand's kind of creative team. Like, we're working on some of that right now, where brands that have been working with creators for a long time and are really enjoying the content that they're making together are now bringing the creators on board in a more in-depth capacity to star in some of the ads that these brands are running, across different online and even like TV channels, which is really cool, being in a TV commercial, right? And so there's so many creative ways that you can, strike up these partnerships. And yeah, it all just comes back to understanding, what does the brand care about? What's most interesting to them? And then like, how big can you think, right? Eric, would love to just kind of touch on, what are some of those add-ons that we work with brands on and that creators can kind of be thinking about when trying to increase their value to a particular brand.
Cases of, exclusivity, or, you have usage rights or whitelisting abilities by the brands, or you could, have ownership discussions as well. All these different factors are really determinant in figuring out what that entire deal is worth. If you do provide exclusivity as part of your creative to that brand, that means that you're not able to take on sponsors from competing brands to that. That list needs to be predefined beforehand. And oftentimes exclusivity will come at a higher price. So it's something that's worth thinking about. Hey, what's the likelihood that you could potentially get a sponsorship from a competing brand? Is that something that you want to do? Do you want to raise the value of your deal, of your contract by offering exclusivity? Or from the brand side of things, is this part of the contract that you want to make sure that you don't have any kind of exclusive rights on there and remove that from those areas? I think that's a super important one, but, brands will oftentimes want to grab as much as possible from you. While at the same time, again, as I mentioned, you can use this the other way of pulling up or pushing down, different levers here to be able to add and reduce value from the overall side of it. So similar to that is usage and whitelisting. So say if you do create, a 60-second integration, the brand, if you do give them usage ability and whitelisting ability, that gives them the right to use that creative in ways that they choose, and launch them, potentially on their own YouTube channel or on their own channels or their website or whatever that might be. These are all points for discussion and negotiation, and again, can have an impact on, the worthiness or the how much that particular contract is worth. Allowing usage rights over a certain period of time are absolutely things that you should think about. And you should also keep an eye out for contracts that come your way from that side. If someone's asking for 6 months of usage for that particular creative, that's effectively taking ownership from you in terms of how you're using that. So that should be worth a whole lot more. Brands will, we've had cases where they might sneak that into your contract. So you have to be aware of it and be able to remove that as you're kind of going through the negotiation piece of that. But in a similar kind of way to a dedicated video, some brands might ask for full ownership. You're doing a full creative for them that they can do exactly whatever they please. It may not even go on your channels, but they might be using your brand name and their brand image, name and likeness, at their disposal. So that also comes at a very different price. How would you think about, pricing these things? Which one's the most important add-on or lever that you would pull or make sure that's not part of, certain contract negotiations? Or how do you think about that just in negotiations generally?
The main one that stands out to me is like ownership, right? And I don't believe that we've ever in our history signed a contract where the brand actually owns the content. To us, this is kind of like it's so critical that creators own their content, because if a brand is asking you to create something that they own, they're basically hiring you, kind of as a paid actor, producing team, editing team, etc. And then they can do whatever, to Eric's point, whatever they want with that content, which in the grand scheme of things, typically is just like not what we're looking to do. For smaller creators that are just getting started and don't quite have that brand equity built yet, that can be a lot more interesting of a lever to pull. But just given that kind of the conversations we're having are with creators that have a lot more brand equity, the value of a company actually owning a piece of content that creator has produced is extremely high, and in most cases just something that we don't want to touch. And that our creators aren't particularly interested in. And so that's kind of where like usage comes into play, because usage allows a brand to use something without owning it. And that's, always time bound. There are certain specifications of how can they use things. And for the creators that we work with, that's extremely important to them. They want to know how their brand is being used. And so when it comes to pricing that, it's a function of a number of things, right? It's like, where do they want to use that? How are they going to use it? For how long are they going to use it? There's so many different, variables at play. But generally, it's really just going to depend on like how you value your brand and how you want it being used. Some people are extremely particular, especially those with larger brands, about usage, and similar to ownership are just a complete no-go on it. And other people are a lot more open to it, especially if you're a smaller creator and you're looking for that extra income stream or extra way to juice up a deal. And you don't mind so much if a bunch of people are seeing an ad with your face on it promoting this company that you either are currently working with or have worked with in the past. And then just a little bit deeper on exclusivity, that again, it's a very case by case basis, and it's very important to look at who does this brand define as their competitors, because you really need to understand what is the opportunity cost of you saying yes to this certain exclusivity. Typically, exclusivity is going to extend past the duration of your contract with a brand. So if you have a 3-month contract with a brand, there may be another 90 days after that of exclusivity. And so then you're looking at a full 6 months where you're prevented from working with anybody who they classify as a competitor. So for that point, it's really important to understand, who are those people that you're going to have to say no to as a result of saying yes to this particular deal. And so again, all of these topics and all of these points are completely negotiable in any conversation that you're in. So it's very important to just know, what are you signing up for, to make sure that you can have, an educated and a transparent conversation, that you don't end up, signing up for something that turns out to bite you in the butt in the future.
I think from my perspective, what interests me the most and where we've seen, I think, the biggest change in mindset really is as it relates to brand equity of the creators themselves. Understanding that your equity as a creator is worth so much more than any dollar figure that you can associate with for one particular brand deal. Think about, as an example, the worth of, say Logan Paul and Prime, just by simply being able to offer their own brand equity to that brand itself, like how much that's worth at this point. Or, Mr. Beast creating Feastables as well. The brand equity for any creator now is by far the most valuable asset that you have. And to your point where you're saying is that really is, it should be, not a non-negotiable by any means, but it's something that should really be considered strongly as, hey, how much am I really willing to give up for something that is truly worth an immense amount from that side, from the creator's perspective.
If you spread yourself too thin, right, then your brand equity gets so diluted that it doesn't mean anything, right? If you have 50 companies that all have the ability to use your face in their advertising, people are just going to get desensitized to your brand, and they're just going to be like, oh, that's the person who's in every ad and will say yes to any opportunity. And maybe that's what you want to be known for, but likely no, likely that's not the reputation that you want to build for yourself. And, the reason why people like, Mr. Beast, for example, can have such a big impact when he fully puts his brand behind something is because he's not just doing that with everything, right? Like, I'm sure the conversations that he's having with his brand partnerships, I'm sure he's extremely, extremely ruthless with anything that's going to involve, his face being used to promote somebody else's brand, because every time that happens, it dilutes his brand a little bit more, such that when somebody sees an ad with his face on it for maybe one of his companies, it's not going to be as impactful because they're like, oh, I already saw him promoting, Shopify this week and 18 other companies, so I don't care as much. Like, Mr. Beast is not going to allow that to happen in the same kind of way that a smaller creator kind of would.
100%. And I'd say that, that's probably been the biggest change that we've seen over the past couple of years is creators recognizing what they're worth, what their brand equity, their name, image, likeness, what that's actually worth. Because that's the most powerful asset that you currently have at your disposal from the creator side. It's worth mentioning too that different niches will have different CPMs or different price points. An entertainment CPM or entertainment price points may be vastly different from a finance standpoint or from a finance creator standpoint. And the ultimate reason for that is because if you think about the end products that are being served to the audiences, they may be worth a whole lot more in terms of, lifetime value for customers. They're able to charge a lot more for those end products. As a result of that, they're able to charge, or they're able to budget a larger amount for creator marketing, for marketing purposes, to be able to acquire those customers. What are some challenges or tips that are worth keeping in mind as you're negotiating for your deals?
To speak with other creators and just kind of understand where the marketplace is at, to make sure that you are, you know, pricing yourself appropriately. Like we've had so many instances where like we've started talking to a new creator and I'm like, okay, so what are you currently charging for your brand deals? And they'll tell me a number and my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, that's, you know, 5x below market rate. Like a lot of creators just don't know what they're worth because they haven't asked around, you know, they haven't done their research. They said yes to the first brand that offered them a couple $100 and just decided that was their rate since then. And yeah, there's just so much power in knowledge and speaking with others in the industry. It's a very friendly industry, honestly. Like it's a small world and people are extremely friendly. And so yeah, highly encourage having those conversations because there's only benefit to come from that as far as I'm concerned.
And even still too, you know, reaching out to an agency and having frank discussions about what they're seeing with their creators is such an easy way to get, you know, a proper market, you know, a market report effectively of what other creators are currently charging, what similar ones, you know, where people would expect to be able to charge your creators from that perspective as well. And I think that's super important. So again, like reaching out and having those kind of discussions, whether it's with, you know, friendly creators or whether it's agencies is hugely important to be able to identify exactly what it is that you're worth from that side too. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to income streams for creators as it relates to ad revenues and platforms? I mean, Apple, why don't you take it away from there?
Yeah, so there's always so much interest in like how much does YouTube pay for 1 million views and like how much creators are making from their AdSense, because that's the easiest thing for people watching videos to understand, right? When you're trying to like speak to a mass audience, like people watch a YouTube video and before it they're served an ad and they understand by now that the creator is getting a piece of the pie on that. It's like if you start making videos on YouTube and you pass the thresholds that are in place, you can turn ads on for your videos and start making money from that. And for a lot of creators, that's great. It's you know, some consistent, ideally consistent in quotes, you know, money that's coming in every month. But for most creators, it's not creating, you know, a livable, consistent, predictable revenue for their business, right? It's a nice to have, but it's not something that you can put all your eggs in that basket, right? And so for a lot of the creators that are trying to, you know, make it as a creator and currently only relying on AdSense, like that can be a really scary place to be. And that's why it's really important to kind of understand what other options do you have at your disposal. Because yes, AdSense is super easy. You start posting on YouTube, you start posting on TikTok, the platforms start cutting you some checks. That's easy. But you know, how can you kind of scale beyond that and, you know, find ways to monetize those views or the value that you're able to provide above and beyond just what the platforms can pay you. Sure, you can put more ad breaks in your videos, and sure, on TikTok, you can make videos that are just over a minute to try to get more of that money. But you really don't have as many levers as you do with something like brand deals, where you can really figure out what your creative angles are. You can put in that extra effort into your ad reads. You can really build those relationships with brands. Those opportunities just don't really exist when it comes to platform ad revenue. And it's a lot more just kind of out of your control for the most part.
You know, this may be controversial, but if I were to put a percentage or a proportion of, you know, from a successful creator, you know, what portion of their total revenue comes from ad reads, I would say that it's most likely going to be less than 5 or even 10% or so. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, that's certainly ideal, right? If you're relying on platform ad revenue for 50% or more of your income, like that's a scary place to be in. For whatever reason, platforms will just slice ad revenue out of the blue.
That's such a big priority for us to be able to help creators do that, so that they can take, again, ownership of their audience in a way that doesn't depend on other factors that you cannot control. Let's talk more about merch. Everybody seems to get super excited about merch. And I got to be honest with you, it's not one of my favorite methods for income streams, for generating more income streams. We can talk a little bit more about that, but I'm curious your thoughts. What do you think about merch and just general creating physical products and physical goods for your audience or as a product?
I think merch is also a great way, similar to affiliate marketing. It's a great way to gauge how good of a connection or how deep of a connection you have with your audience. If you launch merch and it's crickets might mean that you don't have a great relationship with your audience. Might mean that they don't care that much and they don't feel that connected to you. Whereas, a creator that does have that deep kind of relationship can do a merch drop and just sell an incredible amount of physical products. It can be a great gauge for that. And for creators that have that really deep and meaningful relationship, I think merch can be a very successful venture. There's a ton of resources now that make it a lot lower lift than it once was. In the past, you had to place a big order. Maybe you're buying, 1,000 shirts to test this out, and then you're paying a couple $1,000 buying these shirts. You've got to warehouse them. You've got to ship them out. There's so many different moving pieces and logistics. But I mean, now there are so many platforms that allow you to do things like print on demand and not have to go out of pocket at all to start testing out merch and trying it out. I think it can be a really cool way to build depth with your audience, and make them feel like they're part of a special group, part of a community. But in terms of being a massive income stream, for a lot of creators, it doesn't necessarily turn into that unless you are at either a very large scale or have an extremely deep relationship with your audience. If you're not in one of those two buckets, like I would agree, it's not one of my favorite income streams for creators. But Eric, would love to hear your thoughts.
There's definitely method to the madness in how you run and how you create a really lucrative and profitable merch store. But the bottom line is anything that does involve physical goods and anything that does involve a logistics chain is going to take into margins. So regardless of however much you're able to charge, even if it's, say, for a premium product, the margins that you're looking at for merch ultimately really come down to, I'd say, 20 to 30% max bottom line. And that's not that lucrative in terms of like how you think about time spent for designing products, for putting that out there. But for purposes of creating, a loyalty or, exclusive fan base or however you want for certain events, I think it's a brilliant way to bring the community closer. However, for an additional income stream, I definitely think that there are more lucrative ways out there that are much more scalable and much more, value additive in terms of the time spent and the output you can potentially get. And I guess we can talk about that next.
I would say, I completely agree with that. I think if you've got an audience that's large enough and invested enough in you to be willing to spend, say $50 with you on a semi-consistent basis buying your merch, there are far more lucrative ways that you could tap into that to where, like, of that $50 that they're willing to spend on you every quarter, you're not just getting, 10, $15 of that, but instead you're getting a lot closer to, all 50 of those dollars. And I think a great way to do that is through, some kind of digital product. When you're looking at some kind of, subscription based, fan club or group that you can create to, again, like allow those super fans to express themselves and feel like they're a part of that inner circle, whether it be, a resource for your audience, a course. That's always a common example that people are very familiar with. Consulting, even, helping people in your audience to overcome certain issues that they might be facing, or just helping them move forward in different kind of aspects. Like, those are all ways that you can, again, accomplish some of the same goals that merch allows you to do in a way that is, more scalable, fewer logistics, and at the end of the day is going to be a little bit more lucrative for you as the creator.
And I'd say, from the creators that we deal with, obviously it depends on the niche that you're in. Within finance and education, which is the main subset of creators that we deal with, digital products, courses, courses on how to become better with your finances, budgeting, etc., and all that. That does tend to resonate very, very well with an audience within our subset of creators that we primarily deal with, but it may be different for others as well. So, how you become creative and come up with the right digital product set for you is something that ultimately you do it once, and it provides, endless scalability from that part to the Apple, to Apple, what you mentioned there as well. So I think that's why I think digital products is probably the most interesting space to be thinking about in terms of how you potentially can monetize your audience in the best way possible.
Everyone's audience is there for a different reason, right? And so the more you can understand why people are continuing to come back to your videos, why they're even there in the first place, like there are certainly going to be some underlying issues, problems, or just like questions that are unanswered for them. And so a great way to start gathering some data is to survey your audience. So this is something that a lot of our creators will do on a pretty frequent basis is, invest a couple $100 in some Amazon gift cards and then put out a survey to your audience where you ask them feedback, you ask them for specific questions that help you to understand them better, which provides so many benefits, right? It helps you make your content better because you have a better sense of who you're speaking to, helps you do your brand deals better because you have a better sense of, okay, what kind of people do I need to appeal to with these ad reads, helps you design your kind of product roadmap, so to speak, of, what kind of digital products would be interesting and valuable. And like, how do I want to like guide my business to like serve these people that are watching my videos more effectively? And so then, you give away some random, Amazon gift cards to some of the people that fill out that survey to get more people to do it. That can be a really, really valuable way for you to understand what direction to build in a lot more of an informed way. It's easy enough to just kind of shoot from the hip and say, oh, I make tech videos, so I'm going to, make a course or a digital guide on, how to build a gaming PC or whatever, right? Because you make videos about gaming PCs. If you haven't run many surveys with your audience, highly recommend it because having that information about them is invaluable in just doing a better job at what you do.
And I'd add one more thing to that. It is such an unfair advantage for you as a creator to already have an audience. Think of, the many entrepreneurs that are building products and then hoping to find an audience, right? And hoping to find an audience for their products that they've created. What you have is an audience. So now your main goal is to find a product or find a digital product or whatever that might be that fits with that audience. And there's no better way to do that than really try to learn about your audience in the best way possible. And that's one of the most important takeaways, I think, from the creator economy is that it's such an unfair advantage to be a successful creator and building a community. And it really comes down to the power of that community that you've generated and built. So, I asked earlier, Apple, about, what percent of total revenue you'd say is typically coming from platform revenue. I think we agreed, say 5 to 10% or so for the typical creator. I'd say online products and digital products in particular are typically going to be a majority of that, especially within, the finance, the education niche. Just generally speaking, where you're taking ownership of your audience in a very, very different way than simply having them as having them on rented land on the platforms like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and X, etc., and anything else.
I would agree. I think it some of it does come down to personal preference. I would say like some of the creators that we work with prefer to like keep a very simple and lean operation, which you can certainly do with digital products. But in terms of like simplifying their business, we've got some creators that for them, 80% of their income comes from brand deals and partnerships, right? Because although they could build out digital products, build an online community, it's just not what they want to do right now. And like maybe they'll do that in the future, but it kind of comes down to like personal preference in a sense, because some people have that business gene and they're super ambitious and they want to build an empire and build all of these resources and do all this stuff. And some people are just really creative and like just want to make really good videos that either educate people, inspire people, entertain people, and that's really where their passion is. And so for them, they're like, I'm happy to just, promote other people's products rather than, launching and promoting my own. So I think the upside from doing your own products can be really, really high, especially if you have that research and that data to understand what your audience wants from you. Because you have that relationship built with them, and it's so different, right? It's so different for a creator to be telling you about something they actually built and that they are so invested in, that they took the time, they took all of the effort that it took to build something out. That's so different than like, seeing a Facebook ad for a particular product, or, seeing an ad on Instagram from somebody you've never seen before. Like the way that I at least perceive those two things is just totally different. And so there is a lot of power that comes from, creating your own product as well. But all that to say, definitely a lot more effort required there than, doing, just continuing to do what you're doing on a particular platform.
Absolutely. It totally depends on what the goals of the creators are. Again, what the upside of digital products is that you can have, much longer potential passive income streams coming in from that. The moment, say, if you decide that, hey, you know what, I'm done with this creator world. I don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. Going through brand deals and negotiating deals in that way is going to be very transactional, because the moment you stop creating, that's the moment the brand deals are going to stop coming to you as well from that side as well. So it's really just about, personal preference and goals. And where you think that you will be, in a couple of years' time. Like you said, if you don't want to do it now, but you're willing to wait until the future, that's totally fine. But at the same time, too, it does have the potential for creating a lot of pretty significant passive income if done right.
So Eric, of all of the different income streams that we've talked about so far for creators, let's go through them actually, and talk about whether you think they are overrated or underrated. Brand deals and sponsorships to start off. You say overrated or underrated?
Brand deals and sponsorships can be fantastic to start things off, is very good. They can be absolutely reliable. They can be absolutely reliable revenue streams for sure. If you are a larger creator, brand deals and sponsorships are a little bit more difficult to be able to manage and negotiate, and how you think about partnerships from that side.
I'm going to say underrated.
Interesting.
Challenge some of that. I agree with the sentiment, but I think that if the value is there, because I think brand deals are overrated if you're just thinking about a 60-second ad read, get as much money as possible from a brand. I think that's overrated. I think what's underrated is taking the time to build relationships, understand what brands are looking for, and get creative with it. I think that can scale really big, right? Like even somebody like Mr. Beast, for example, who's largest creator on platform, is still doing brand deals and partnerships alongside promoting his own kinds of businesses. And so in my mind, it's underrated if you're approaching it from a long-term standpoint, but overrated if you're just short-term, give me some money.
Ad revenue from platforms.
I would say totally overrated. I think there's so much hype around, how much YouTube paid me for 5 million views, or how much I got paid for a viral video. I think that there's so much attention paid towards this income stream, but at the end of the day, like, it really is not how most creators are monetizing.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Massively overrated. It is, as we talked about, it is such a small portion, or can be such a small portion of the overall revenue pie. But there is much more attention for an audience to know how much they're making off of ad revenue. But really, that doesn't scratch the surface of what the potential is from that side. So it's massively overrated.
What about affiliate marketing?
Affiliate marketing, I think, is very underrated. There's so many creative ways that you can think about how to utilize affiliate marketing in areas that, typically might not be thought of. We talked before about, digital products. You can associate them with relatively low lift deliverables, but at the same time, you can utilize them to amplify funnel revenue targets. And there's so many ways that you can utilize affiliate marketing in ways that, in ways that I think is massively underrated at this stage.
Completely agree. I think underrated. I think there's so many benefits you can get out of affiliate marketing, which we talked about at length. So completely agree.
Merch.
I'm going to say overrated. I think again, similar to like AdSense and platform revenue, I think a lot of attention gets paid to merch from a, how to make money as a creator standpoint. Again, I think it's great for community building. I think it's great for bringing people together and deepening that brand relationship. But in terms of an actual income stream, I got to say overrated.
Merch is completely overrated. Margins are low. Yes, you have products, you have services like Shopify, Printify, Tmail, etc., and all those that can help make that process easy. And you can build, much more tighter communities in that way. As a revenue source, I think it's massively overrated.
All right. And then how about courses, digital products, consulting, things in that vein?
I think this is probably the most underrated area of being a creator, and how you can, in the most effective way, build a really, really significant revenue stream And it doesn't even require a massive audience to do so, but what it does require is a strongly converting audience to build scale into something that really has, call it, say, more or less one-time cost to set up and then some maintenance fees thereafter, which are really minimal. But I think this is probably one of the most underrated revenue streams that creators should be thinking about.
Agreed. Completely underrated. So much potential here. And yeah, just knowing your audience and being able to give them what they're looking for is such a unique aspect of being a creator that I think a lot of people are kind of neglecting.
And this goes back to what we talked about before. You have an audience. Now your job is really to come up with a product or a service that fits with that audience. That is such an unfair advantage and really should be the main mission of every creator, to figure out what it is that they need as they think about monetizing their audience. We know several eight-figure creators that have really built most of their revenue streams through digital products. And that is an incredibly exciting opportunity that I think just really, really showcases how underrated this is, especially in relation to platform ad revenue.
Completely agreed. And like within each of these buckets that we talked about too, like you don't have to be a creator to benefit from them, right? Like anybody could come in to any of these, I would say, ideally underrated, ways of generating income and provide a ton of value to creators and see some significant upside in that, right? Like that's where we fit into the picture, right? Like our whole focus is just on brand deals and partnerships. And although we're not the ones doing the creating ourselves, we're able to help to build out that industry, help creators to generate that consistent income and provide a ton of value. And the same thing can be done in any of these categories, right? Anybody can come in and, help creators launch more digital products or, help them strategize, how do they build out a funnel that leads into any number of different things, right? Like how do you come in and help a creator with their affiliate marketing? There's so many different ways that people who don't want to be that face in front of the camera can still come in here and help creators to build out these various different income streams and opportunities, which is something that I think is super interesting because a lot of people don't want to be that face in front of the camera, but they do want to be involved. And so there's so many different ways to make that a reality.
Each one of these revenue streams, like they're not singular, meaning that you can combine many of them together. Combining affiliate marketing with digital courses is a brilliant way of perhaps not even having to create your own course. As an example, say Apple has the best personal finance course that I've ever seen in my entire life, and I'm a creator. We can set up an affiliate relationship between the two of us where I promote his product with my audience without having to create my own digital course from that side and win there as well. So there's so many ways that you can utilize this together and collectively too. So it's not really a one size or single lane revenue streams where this is the only way to think about things. I think it's extremely important to think about things collectively and how do you synergize amongst all these different revenue streams to really build into something bigger.
Yeah, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Like go out there, talk to other creators that ask them, how are you making money? How are you monetizing? What things are they doing? Learn from them. If there's ways for you guys to collaborate on different, projects or initiatives, like that's always super exciting. And there's no shortage of people that are working on really exciting things. So it's really just a matter of like, go out there, talk to people, learn from people and see what you can apply yourself. That's episode 1 of Creators Agency Podcast. We're here to try to just provide some insight, some transparency into what goes on behind the curtain with creators, businesses, and just kind of how value is created in this world. So hopefully you guys got some value out of that.
And we're excited to do this again. We're super pumped.
Yeah.
We have a ton of really exciting episodes coming up, really exciting topics to talk about as well. And again, we want to provide as much value as possible and really excited to do this again soon.
See you guys in the next one.
See ya.